Oh, hello everyone, and welcome to February 15th once more. It appears Set 2 has come. Well, not yet, it hasn't released yet, but we are in the playtesting phase, and there are free cards for every element, as well as a shiny new Koilo card. So here I'm just going to talk about each of the new cards, and how they will synergize with the previous set. And as well as some thoughts on, like how it's February 15th again, as well as some developments since our last video together. So here we have Hydra, we have Dew Sprite. So for the elements in set 2, I've sort of been wanting to add new cards to patch up the weaknesses of the old elements. So as you can see, there's Dew Sprite, which is a 1 cost 1/0 that says when played, this gains 1 HP for every Sarira in your grave. A very nice card. It's a very neat card. I wouldn't say it fixes any issues Hydro had, because Hydro is already pretty nice in the defense category. Very big damage soakers like Rain and who else? Rain also counts, I suppose. But I mean, there was also a lot of problems with cards like Bubble who can't block. But I think Dew Sprite is a really nice card to replace Bubble if you find that Bubble spectral mechanic isn't really helpful to your gameplay. So there's that. Then we have Oasis Sprite, a free 0/5 that says static, you gain +1 Sarira in your grave. This does have a bit of a weird wording, but essentially just means that no matter what, you will always have 1 Sarira in your grave, or 1 more Sarira in your grave, which makes 1 cost basically free and 2 costs 1 cost, and etc. It's a very nice card, it has big HP to soak up damage. It's a very nice ramp card, even though it doesn't do much on its own. It's fine, I suppose. And then the main part is Sea Sprite, which is a 4/2/2 that says static spectral. This gains +1 AP for every Sarira in your grave. This is probably one of the very necessary cards for this deck. Previously Hydro really didn't have much options in terms of attack. I mean, all it had was Tsunami, which was its win con, but now there are actual ways to win via damage, and Sea Sprite is a very easy way to get that in. It's very easy to accumulate a lot of Sariras in your grave, even though it's a 4 cost. Of course, this is a static card, which means that it changes constantly, so there's that to look out for. But I should say, with cards like Vapor and Rain, you should have about like 4 or 5 cards in your grave at almost all times, which makes this a very nice card because, then it would be like a 7/2 for only 4 costs. Very nice, and it's a spectral, so it can't be attacked. And synergizes well with cards like Stream Sprite. Overall, quite a nice selection of new cards for Hydro, I would say. And let's move on to Pyro, who I think got the best overhaul of them all. Pyro was quite weak, even though it had higher damage than most decks. It kind of suffered because a lot of its attacking was like conditional, and oftentimes there were a lot of cards that lost their attacks for whatever reason. So it wasn't really that great, and of course the big volcano card was a 5 cost that didn't really do much on its own, so it was kind of bad. So new Pyro cards attempt to fix that, starting with the most powerful card, one of the most powerful cards in the set, Ash Sprite, a 2/0/2 that says static. Ally sprites gain +1 AP, negate other ally sprites effects. I think this is very, very, very good for the deck. It synergizes well with cards like Ember. It does prevent Transcend from happening, which is a little dicey. But I think the main component this works with is certain other cards in this set that come with the free new keywords added. It will be very nice with those cards. Um, and on top of that, it also synergizes well with Heat Sprite, a card that set its AP to, well, no, that gained -1 AP for every enemy card in the board. So this is a very nice counter to that because it will not do that and it will even gain 1 extra AP. It's a very nice card. But there is, of course, some trade-offs if your deck is effect heavy. Then we have Spice Sprite, a 4/1 free that says Transcend Free. Mill an enemy sprite in the field with 2 costs for less. I think this is a very good card. It's a very challenging card to use, but I think that's worth it. So Pyro is also meant to be the removal deck, the card with the deck, element with the removal cards, but previously I feel like the only card that attempted to do that was Magma, and that was more of a Death Touch card rather than a true removal card. So now we have Spice Sprite, which does still have a conditional, but it's a very nice card. You can get rid of cards every turn, which is, very nice because 2 costs and less are usually played every turn, so it should be very easy to get rid of them. Of course, you can only do that in the field, which is another limitation that, of course, you can solve with some manipulation from other elements. And oh yeah, there's Fever Sprite. So Fever Sprite is one of the new 5 costs. I made a 5 cost for every element which didn't have it, as well as one for Pyro and Chrono. So now Pyro gets 5, a 5/1/0 in the form of Fever Sprite, which is the first sort of spell card that is a 5 cost or higher, or 4 costs or higher, I suppose. Which says, when played, ally sprites gain ×2 AP until the end of the battle phase. This is very nice. So multiplicative bonuses are always very good, especially in this game, and there's a very special card that this card synergizes with from set 1, or basic 1. I will not name it, but if you find it, then this card is very, very powerful. Um, but in its intended form, I would say it's still a very nice card. You can boost a lot of free costs with free attacks for even some cards like Tendon Sprite, which has a 4 attack into a 8 attack or 6 attack. So this is a very nice way to end the game really fast. Of course, if you can't end the game there, then it might be over for you because this is a very costly card. And of course, you must play something and move it up. So, there's a lot of bad things that could happen if this doesn't go well. But if it does go well, you're probably guaranteed to win. And that's Pyro. I think this patched up a lot of the issues it had. For Cryo was already a very powerful element, so the new cards aren't really too powerful, but nonetheless, they are still quite good in filling up some roles that weren't seen in set 1. So let's see what they are. So we have Gel Spray, 1/1/1, that says static. This gains the effect Flash and Hunt until the end of the battle phase, if you pass first. So in this set, I began to add some of these like tracking cards. So in the first set's design philosophy, I should say, there were a lot of ways that you didn't have to track stuff, such as Transcend. The mechanic of Transcend was directly made to make it less tracky, I would say. I don't have a good word for that. But in this set, there's a lot more of these types of cards which you just have to remember. Of course, they on the effect text is pretty clear when they happen, but I think as the sets go on, and of course I've already made the cards for future sets already, but as the sets go on, there will be more and more mechanics like these, which might not be pleasing for some people, but I think they are a good way to add more stuff. And also, hunt. Hunt is a new keyword. It's seen on site sprite, which says when this would attack this lane, it may attack a lane with an ally enemy sprite instead. So it basically gets to target anything else in the field instead of its own lane, but only if there is something in that other lane. Very nice. And of course, it also gains flash, which makes it a very nice card to put out on the first few turns to, quickly get rid of some very weak stuff, like perhaps a free 2 that's already sustained some damage. Okay, then we have Sheet Sprite, a free 2/3 that says as your action, move this to your temple or field. So this might seem weak, but it doesn't specify that it has to stay in its own lane. And of course, it also doesn't specify that it can't move to the temple or the field if it is an either of those when it uses this. So it basically can move around wherever it wants, and it's also a very good way to prevent Fido strategies which lock you, as well as just other strategies where you're in an inopportune situation, which is very common in this new set because there are lots of wacky things that can happen to you with the new cards, as we'll see later on. Then we have Glacier Sprite, a 4/3/0 that says when played, opponent passes as their next action. Immensely powerful. If they can't pass while moving something up, this is a very deadly card to use in conjunction with a deck composing of Fido. There's a lot of ways you could use this. There's also Anemo, which can potentially activate this, and there's also Oxo, which you can give it HP, and it smacks for a hefty free, along with its already powerful effects. So there's quite a few things you can do with this. But overall, I think it's very balanced. There are some there are some questionable cards that might be nerfed later on because of how certain cards ignore, payment cost in general. So we might see that. But overall, I think the cryo cards are neat. They aren't very powerful. We have a free 0 that's a 4 cost. We have a 2/3 that's a free cost, and a 1/1/1, which aren't very stat breaking. But I mean, in set 1, Winter Sprite was also a 2/3, so there's a precedent for that. But of course, the power of cryo is not dependent on its stats. And then we have Geo. So in the first set, there was very few, well, there was quite a few obliterate effects, but there weren't really that many to make landslide functional, especially with the Exhume ability. So there's a lot more ways to obliterate now, and they're potentially much more annoying. So let's see what they are. So there's Dirt Sprite A101 that says as your action, obliterate this. Obliterate the top card of the opponent's deck, a very dangerous card that can get rid of some nasty stuff. And of course, it isn't that valuable itself, so there's no worry in obliterating itself. So it's a very nice, good card. Especially you can stockpile it on the first turn or something like that. Overall, very good card. But of course, the next card is a very powerful card. It's a 2/2/0 in the form of Dust Sprite that says when played, obliterate a card in the opponent's hand. I know how games feel about hand removal, hand hate, but I think this is fine. A fine little card. It should slurp up all your resources in a turn and prevent you from moving up a card unless you properly build around it. And of course, if you do properly build around it, then it will be a very excellent card. Of course, in that situation, the opponent will probably also have their own very powerful deck. So, of course, that's sort of the thing with this game. Deck building always trumps individual card power. Cards only get more and more exponentially more powerful with some synergies, and of course, the sprite because of how it's questionably interactive. So I would say it's at a very static linear power level. So it shouldn't really be as powerful as some cards are when they realize they're full potential. And then we have Mountain Spray, a 4/2/4 that says when attacking with no overkill, obliterate the blocker if this attack mills the blocker. So this is basically a precise hit type of mechanic. So if you kill an enemy and they have exactly 0 health left, it will obliterate them instead of milling them, which is very nice. And of course, if you do manage to get overkill, that's still free points. So there's basically no downsides to this card. It's a very nice card. The only downside is that's really costly with sort of bad stats. But I think that's a fine trade-off. Obliterate isn't really as powerful in this game as it is in some other games with Exile type effects because of Exhume, which we'll probably see. You can see it right here. But I don't find Exhume to be the most broken ability against Obliterate, and of course there will be ways to counter it in some later sets. So stay tuned for that. Sorry if I'm coughing and whatnot. Okay, then we have Necro. So Necro's problem in the first set was that most of its main cards had 1 or less attack. So I decided to add some more cards with more attack. And of course, this is the first deck to receive a 5 cost that didn't previously have a 5 cost. And we'll be later looking at the precons, which will feature the new 5 cost instead of, Afterlife Sprite being the center card. So we have Dread Sprite, a 2/2/2 that says when blocking, you may assume we're Mole 2 or Mole 2. So Mole is another new keyword. So moling just means it's basically a mulligan. You may mulligan up to 2 cards in your hand, and you can assume what that does. A fairly decent card, but it only has 2 HP, so it is questionable in its viability. But of course, with Necro, you can summon these cards every time. And of course, Exhume is very nice against the Obliterate strat that we saw earlier, and very beneficial for things like Chrono, as well as its own strategy where you play cards from the discard. There's a lot of good things with this card, potentially. Then we have Fright Sprite, a good reason to use the Exhume mechanic. A free 2/2 that says when milled from your deck, exile, or hand, you may play this sprite for free. Very nice. It synergizes well with a lot of previous cards, a lot of Exhume cards, and of course Haunt Sprite from set 1, which milled a card from hand, is a 0/1/1. So that's another good usage of this. And of course, it doesn't specify to the temple, so it's just an extra body in the field, which is very nice, as always. Then we have Soul Sprite, a 5/3/4. As your action, play a Sarira for free. Note that it does not specify your Sarira, it just says Sarira. So you can play opponent Sariras in the opponent's field if you wish. I don't know why you would though, but there's always that option. And of course, maybe there might be some mechanics that allow the opponent to abuse your card's effects for their own benefit later, so who knows. But for you, this is a very powerful card. It can summon a lot of things for free, including other 5 costs from other elements, so it's a very nice card for those type of strategies, which just put a bunch of big cards and mix them in from other elements into one deck, and this is a very nice feel for that type of deck. I think this is very nice. And yeah, that's Necro. As you can see, all the new cards have more than 1 attack, which makes Necro actually push if you run a mono Necro deck. Of course, most people will splash in some other elements into the deck. But I mean, there is always the option now to only run Necro in your deck, and I think that will be completely fine. Chrono didn't really have an issue. Chrono's issue was just that it was a little too niche. So there's now a lot of very good options to deal with, how fickle some of the abilities are, and of course a lot of abilities like Season Sprite and event sprite dependent on your current situation in your discard or in your field. So a lot of cards in this new set in Chrono are a lot less finicky, a lot less fickle, way more, like simple to use. Like Date Sprite, a 2/3/2 with a very nice free cost level set for a 2 cost, but with the downside of when attacking with overkill, set this sprite's AP to the overkill. So this will slowly decrease until it gets to 1 where it can probably no longer do overkill. So it's a very nice aggro card, and of course if you attack with no overkill, then it won't set itself to that overkill, which means that it can very easily get rid of some dangerous 2/3s. But of course it'll kill itself in that circumstance. But overall it's a very nice card to have. A very powerful card, I would say. Potentially nerf incoming, potentially, but we will see with more play. Then we have History Sprite 3/2/4 with the new Dissenter ability. Ooh, Dissenter. So Dissenter is a new way that the game interacts with itself, just like how Transcend interacted with rotation that is not used in the game normally. Decenter is a way to use resources outside of the action phase, as well as a way to respond to things. But of course, Decenter only works before battle, so when this sprite, say it's right here, and so this is my enemy, so I can choose to pay 1 right before its battle to have its effect activate, which is very nice, I would say. And of course, so how that works is the person with priority, Dissenter effect goes off first if both players have a Dissenter ability to use. So in History Sprite's case, if I pay 1 from my grave, then I get to use this ability, which uses another new thing, Demill. Demill was technically in set 1 in the form of cycling your deck in that definition, but here demill is an actual word used to note that a card is sent back to the deck, just like how mill, bury, play, draw, obliterate all work. So it's a very good card to have recycle certain cards that you want back, like perhaps a event sprite or a timeline sprite, or just any big cards. And speaking of timeline sprite, this is the second and final deck that already had a 5 cost that gets a new 5 cost in the form of Death Sprite, a 5/6 free. I think this is the first 6 attack in the game that says static hunt. This sprite must attack a lane with an enemy sprite in its field. It's a very intriguing application of the keyword. So yeah, it will be forced to always attack a lane with an enemy sprite, and if it can't, then it will just attack its lane. So, of course, this is very nice to have, but of course, it will only be doing overkill damage most of the time, if even that, because there are quite a few 6 HP cards, like, of course, Spectre Sprite from set 1, which might impede its big 6 attack. And there's, of course, some cards that might even survive it, like perhaps some HP gain from Fido, or perhaps Nirvana Sprite from set 1. So there's a lot of ways to deal with this. And of course, this only has 3 HP, which is kind of low. So there's a few ways to deal with this, and of course, but of course, this is still a very powerful card. It's a pretty hard card to use though, so keep in mind. So I think this overall fixes Chrono's issue with having its stats always be being variable, as well as an over reliance on the discard, which always cycles back in, making you have lots of weak turns. So of course, Death Sprite always has a 6 attack. History Sprite will always have a 2 attack. And Date Sprite, while it won't always have a free attack, a free attack is always good, even if only temporary. So there's a lot of options now to prevent all that variability. So Somo really didn't have any problems, which is why Somo probably got some of the weakest cards in set 2. So we start off with a 001 with Skin Sprite. Do believe this is our first zero cost of the video. So it says Transcend Free, a sprite in the field gains -1 HP. So, yeah, this is a very good card, I would say. It's another nice addition to the Somo family in the form of more damage. It's sort of like Blood Sprite, but it's more targeted, but of course it loses its sort of field effect ability, where you can deal damage to multiple things if you set it up right, in the case where you don't damage any of your own cards. But, in some ways, this is always a nice card to have, in case, you don't have any ways to prevent your own things from dying. And of course, you can just put a bunch of them in the macro and they'll keep transcending and killing things, but it doesn't say enemy sprite specifically. So it might start attacking your own things if the enemy decides to put all their stuff in the temple. Okay, then we have Rash Sprite, a free to free that says Dissenter, Mole free. You gain +1 toll for every card you milled through this effect this round. Very interesting ability, very interesting use of the Dissenter effect. So if you're in quite a bit of a pickle, you can use this effect to quickly get out, like save yourself from certain death, or perhaps even just win the game on the spot. A very nice, good card. It can, it would basically translate into 5 damage, with 3 of the damage like already being turned into overkill damage. So a very nice card to just have in general. Um, and Muscle Sprite, a 4/1/5 that says Dissenter free, you gain +3 toll, a very direct card, very obvious what it does. So this is sort of like an evolution to Rash Sprite. It has sort of a similar effect, except it's a guaranteed free toll, because for Rash Sprite to get its free toll, you probably need to have like 3 cards in hand at the very least to mold free. So of course, Muscle Sprite just allows you to gain free directly, and it's a very nice damage sponge, as well as dealing 1 damage, so it can take out some weaker targets like 3/2s, for example. So it's overall a very powerful card. But of course, if you don't use the sensor ability, then it's just a vanilla 4/1/5, which is very bad. So you probably do want to use its ability, which is very costly. But there's abundance of good zero costs in the game now, so I think you can make it work very easily. So overall, I think Somo has not really been fixed because it didn't really need fixing, and it just got more good options to choose from. Psycho really was one of the worst elements in the first set, so there's now new cards that fix it. So one of Psycho's biggest problems was that all of its effects were RNG based, and its actual stats were very bad. And even if you do win on those RNG rolls, they don't actually increase the stats of anything or do much of anything. So, I mean, I suppose they did do some things, but all they could do was play cards for free or not for free. That if you were playing a mono psycho deck would just also be sort of bad. So, were psychic sprites effect that did free damage to anything, but once again, there's a chance that you don't have anything to target. And psychic sprites effect stats were pretty bad already, so I think this is a very good boost to the Psycho deck, because we have Sight Sprite, the card with the first keyword reminder text that we see, and we already know what Hunt does. And it's a 1/2/1, or a 1/1/2, I suppose. That's how I should order it. And I mean, it's a very obviously good card. I mean, of course, this has sort of the Ember Sprite stat bit line, which is, of course, a very good stat line for 1 cost, because most 1 costs have 1/1/1s. and it, of course, has Hunt, which allows it to get rid of a lot of things. And of course, if you're dealing with another one cost, there's a high chance that it is a 1/1/1, which means that Sight Sprite won't die. And there's an even higher chance that it won't even take damage if you use its Hunt ability to your benefit and potentially get rid of something that could get Toll. So it's a very nice way to kill things without sacrificing your own card advantage or resource advantage in that case, because of course you can always bury it at the turn after the battle phase that you wish to use it on for more resource on next turn. Then we have Thought Sprite, one of the best cards for this archetype, I should say. A free 2 that says when shuffling, send a card from the shuffle zone to the top of the shuffle zone. A immensely good card that basically guarantees all RNG rolls, which basically, sort of breaks the game. And of course, or the Psycho game, I should say. And of course, there's also a free 2 as a free cost, which is always excellent. This does not work on deck cycles because, of course, since it's a hidden zone, you can't actually look inside of its contents and put a card on the top, so you can really only choose the bottom card or the top card to put on the top, which isn't really that great. So overall, it's a fine card in Psycho decks, but it's just a vanilla free 2, which is also sort of fine because a lot of free 2s are vanilla-ish. Then we have Vertigo Sprite, which is the only new RNG card in this set. A 4/2/5 that says as your action, choose a cost, shuffle your grave. If the top card has a chosen cost, flip an enemy sprite. So there's some splashing in from Fido here, or you can transform an enemy sprite into a token, which is very nice. This could fit well in the Fido deck. This could also just fit well in a general deck where you can just get rid of a problematic threat. And of course, it doesn't specify in the field, so you can transform any dangerous little card into a token, which will be, of course, a problem to the opponent because, well, tokens don't count as sprites, and we all know what that means. So yeah, overall Psycho got quite a few nice new options. They have very good stats now, and of course a lot of cards synergize with each other now to create a very balanced deck, I would say, balanced element. So we have finished the first quadrant. Let's move on to the second, or hemisphere, or however you want to say this. So we have the new Astral deck. Astral wasn't really suffering too much, mainly because there are some really good cards in that deck, namely Starlight and Moon. But the rest of the cards were very bad. Crater, Vacuum, and Meteor. Yeah, they were all kind of bad. Except for Meteor. Meteor was fine, but overall they were very niche, and there will be more niche cards. And this will introduce the. Did we look at that other keyword yet? We looked at hunt. We looked at mole. I do believe this might be the final keyword. Well, I already showed you it, so we'll just see. So, of course, the final keyword is pacifist, which means the sprite cannot attack in the battle phase, and this keyword reminder text is found on a 0/2/2 Nebula sprite. So Nebula Sprite is just a 0/2 essentially. Meanwhile, Comet Sprite is a 4/3/3 that has every keyword currently. It's Flash, Hunt, Sneaky, and Spectral, which all seem very nice. It means it does free damage before anyone else does, and you can choose any target, and then it does free more at the end of the turn to any target again. And it can't even be attacked, so it's a very good card, you would think, but then it has Pacifist, which negates everything, so it just does nothing, and it's a break. So you might think this is bad, and you might think this is very bad for the Astral deck, and it is very bad because these cards are very niche. But of course, there's always some ways to alleviate that. And of course, we already saw that with Ash Sprite, so you can get rid of the pacifist. You can make Nebula a free 2 with 0 cost. Obviously, very good. And you can make Comet Sprite a 4/4 free, but I mean, that's less good. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can look at that. But of course, the main card that I want you to use for this is the new 5 cost for the Astral Element. that wasn't that didn't exist previously, and that is of course Galaxy Sprite, which is a 5/1/6 that says when you activate an effect, negate end parts of the effect. So all effects are made up of parts. So parts are the effect text separated by the periods and semicolons. So of course, as we know, semicolons represent sequential ordering, and periods are usually used in static effects. So you can snip off or keywords. So with this, you can snip off any part that you don't like in the effect text. So like say in static sprite from set 1, we said mill a Cerera to make it attack. So you can get rid of the mill a Cerera part and it will still attack. This cannot get rid of the trigger though, which is not considered a part, it's considered a trigger, which is a different part of the effect. Or I shouldn't say part, a different section of the effect. And of course, you can use Galaxy Sprite to get rid of the pacifist part, or even the spectral part, and you can get rid of the pacifist part from Nebula Sprite. So there's a lot of interesting game-breaking applications with Galaxy Sprite that I'm sure will be seen later. So we will be excited to see if this will need to be nerfed. It potentially does need to be nerfed, but we'll see. And we have Anemo, which is another element that really didn't need anything new. All it needed was new ways to interact with its own things, and that is what we gave it. So we have the 001 Wing Sprite that says when played, swap an ally sprite with an ally sprite. Pretty self-explanatory. And then we have Tempest Sprite, a 2/1 that says when played, swap an enemy sprite with an enemy sprite. Pretty self-explanatory again, and the reason I added these two was to make better use of the swap mechanic, as well as add when played effects or when played triggers to Anemo, because previously Anemo didn't really have those. And of course, it was all about activating effects, and Flight Sprite and Wind Sprite triggered ally sprites with when played effects. So of course, and Anemo didn't really have any of those. So now it does, and these are very, very powerful if you use them in conjunction with those cards, especially with Flight Sprite, because of course it can use them at a time when they shouldn't really be used. So there are some very interesting applications for that. Then we have Weather Sprite, a 5/3/5 that says as your action. Opponent reveals all cards in their hand. Swap an enemy sprite with a card in their hand. Mmm, very delicious. Now, of course, there's a chance that you might get that something bad might happen, like say the only card they have left in your hand is a 5 cost and you accidentally swap that in. But I mean, the risk is always a fun part of the game, and of course, there's always synergies from Photo which allow you to look at the opponent's hand. So, of course, you should make use of that potentially. And of course, it has a very good stat spread, and you don't have to use it. It's an Astro Action ability, so you don't have to use it if you don't want to. And of course, it synergizes with effects like Galaxy Sprite, so if you find that you don't like their hand, you can just snip off the second part. Overall, I think Anemo's new cards fix the lack of when played effects, and I think they're fine. They have good stats, I think, for what they do. So Photo is a very good deck, but the problem with it is that it lacks low cost cards, and it still sort of lacks low cost cards even with this update. But hopefully this makes Shields more accessible with the introducement of Bliss Spray, a 1/1/1 that says when milled from non-board zones, you may attach this as a shield to an enemy ally sprite. which is very, very nice. So, this includes when it gets milled when paid as a Sarira. So you can just attach it to any card in the field. Very nice. Then we have Glint Spray, a free 0/3 that says Disinter 1, mill N ally shields. If you can do this gains at plus N AP permanently. So this is another example of those tracking type abilities that are a little hard to track sometimes, but I think they're worth it in the new mechanical depth they provide. And of course, it's a Disinter ability, so you really make your opponent wonder if they should allow you to they should pass, even if you might suddenly create a bunch of shields that will feed this card. Now, of course, this card has 0 attack initially, so of course it requires a lot of shields to feed it, but I think there's a very good chance this becomes a very, very powerful deck card. Then we have Mirage Sprite, a 4/5/4 that says static pacifist spectral, negate this sprite's effects. Pacifist and Spectral if it has a shield attached. This is probably one of the best cards mechanically that I have designed because of how it works. So it basically can only attack and can only be hit if it has Spectral, not Spectral, if it has a shield attached. So I think that's a very good way to balance this card. And of course, it can still slowly lose HP through HP loss effects like Blood Sprite, Skin Sprite, um, Plague Sprite, for example, those type of cards. But of course, it can also be damaged through excess damage that cannot be taken by the shields. So there's a lot of ways to get rid of this, and of course, if you cannot get rid of this, then it's a very powerful 5 cost, which I think is worth it considering it's a 4 cost. Did I say 5 cost? I meant 5 attack. So yeah, a very nice effect, I would say. Then we have Skoto. So Skoto is another deck that really didn't need anything new or good. So we have Hate Spray, which has the keyword reminder text for mole. So it's a 0/0 that says when played, mole free. Pretty simple to understand. If you set up some HP gains resources, then of course Hate Spray is a very powerful 0 cost with 2 attack, with also a mole ability, but if you don't have it, then it's a very simple way to mole cards from your hand, even after the beginning of the game, which is the only time you can mulligan. Then we have Night Spray, 1/1/1 that says Disinter 1, you draw up to 2 cards from your deck. Potentially good. I wouldn't say draw cards are super important, but the timing of this is very important because it allows you to have 5 cards in hand when you need to bury up to 2, which of course gives you lots more options as well as lots more hand after you bury 2, if that is what you wish, and that's probably the best decision. So there's a lot of good ways to use this. And of course, you'll probably want to put 2 once you use its ability because it's a Disinter 1, so you'll have to pay 1 to use it. Okay, then we have Agony Spray, a 4/0/1. This seems very bad until you look at this effect, which says when milked from your board, you gain +1 toll for every HP enemy space in this lane have. So your opponent will probably attempt to get rid of all their cards in that lane, so it's a very nice scare tactic. And of course, it won't do anything unless it dies, so you'll also have to find a way to get rid of it with Blood Spray, perhaps. Or Skin Sprite. There's a lot of easy ways to get rid of this. But of course, this is a part of Scoto. It always has been where setting up traps is the key to winning. Overall, I think this really helped develop Scoto's theming more because previously there were very few draw effects or only effects that care about card advantage. But now there are ways to get card advantage easier, as well as more trap type cards like Agony. Fido didn't really need much. It was bad, But the problem was because all of its cards costed too much, and all the new cards are 2 cost, 1 cost, 0 cost, so they're all cheap, which is very nice. So we begin with Seed Sprite, which is a 001 that says Transcend Free. You may create a token from the top of your deck to your field. Just a token creation, very simple. Could backfire, but I mean, there's a lot of ways to prevent that from happening. Then we have Vine Sprite, a 104 that says when played as a token, you may flip this token. So once again, a very nice little spooky card that suddenly pops out to reveal that's a very dangerous 0-4. Of course, you can play this normally for a nice little shield. And finally, Root Sprite, possibly one of the most powerful cards introduced in this set, which is a 201 that says cards. That's the static effect that says cards in this lane gain the effect Pacifist. I think this is a very fine skill to have, very nice. But yeah, I mean, all of these very highly contribute. Well, not really these two, but Root Sprite highly contributes to how you set up tokens, because previously, token lines can be easily interrupted by your own cards attacking the opponent's tokens, or the opponent moving up and you having to deal with them, causing them to create tokens. But then you get rid of those tokens, so Root Sprite prevents that by making basically tokens immune to being destroyed. They also prevent tokens from attacking, so they remove the one downside token stalling / locking has for the user. And of course, it's just a very nice general card to lock down lanes. Then we have Oxo. So Oxo just had an issue of most of its earlier cards couldn't really be played because they were at 0, because they didn't have 0 HP, which led you to die from sculling, as well as a lack of ways to block the enemy's attacks. So now there's a lot more cards with actual HP, starting with 202 Acid Sprite. As your action, mode 2, play a card from your hand to your temple with 0 cost, with no, not 0 cost, with 0 HP and free cost for less for free. So you can play any 0 HP cards with free cost for less for free with this card. That's a very nice card that supplements the strategy well. It of course pairs well with Genome Sprite. You can make very powerful chains with that. Playing a dangerous Mutate Sprite, a dangerous free 2 that gives you 2 cost, 2 toll for free with Acid Sprite. So there's a lot of good ways, but of course it requires a lot of setup and good luck, good hand draws. So it's a difficult card to play, but Oxo has always been a little difficult because it doesn't play in with the normal type of gameplay. So I think this is a fine card to have. So the next card we have is Fusion Sprite, a free 2 free that says when an ally sprite is played, activate the sprites when played of trigger. Synergizes very well with Anemo, as well as its own element, because it gives its own elements when played at 0 HP effects. It basically doubles them, and of course you can play multiple of them to activate them multiple times. It's just very good for a lot of other decks, like Heat Sprite or Dust Sprite, for example. Lots of good 0 HP cards introduced this time, as well as cards introduced last time, like Plague Sprite. You can do negative 2 HP on multiple cards, which is very powerful. And this synergizes well with the next card, the big 5 cost of this deck. Oh yeah, I neglected to mention that Weather Sprite was the big card of Nemo. This is also, I believe, the final big 5 cost of the set, or the new one at least. And it is Gamma Sprite, a 5/50 that says when played, this gains plus free HP if you have no toll. I mean, I feel like this element has slowly become the catch-up type element, where if you have no toll or very little toll, you can very easily catch up with cards like these, which is of course a sort of gameplay style that I think has been greatly benefited by this element, because this element does indeed do that quite often. It's very weak at the start, but once you start setting up, it becomes very powerful. And of course, with cards like these, it encourages you to take the game slowly at the start. So you can explode the opponent with cards like Gamma Spray, which is a 5 free counting as effect. And of course, if you add Fusion, then it will be a 5/6. Of course, outside of that, it's a vanilla card, so there is questionable usage there, but I don't think you need many effects to make this viable. It's a very powerful big card with no downsides, so yeah. Then we have Pafo. Pafo's problem was that all of its 0 and 1 costs were very weak. Virus Sprite didn't do anything. Usually, it only did things if the opponent played like swarm type strategies, like found in decks like Necro or decks like Hydro. But with this deck, the cards are more versatile and universal against all strategies, like Mold Sprite A111 that says Dissenter 1, this sprite attacks all enemy sprites. Very, very nice. It basically it does as much damage as their enemy sprites, and of course it still does that 1 damage, so it's a very nice way to slowly get rid of cards. I feel like Patho has transformed into the sort of control deck, as you would expect from a element that targets a location that most other elements don't target because it's like a safe location. Then we have Culture Sprite, a 2/2 free that says when an ally sprite attacks with Overkill, the sprite basically attacks again. So very nice effect, I will say. But questionable if it's going to be super good. Then we have Pollution Spray, a 4/1/5 that says Static Flash Hunt Sneaky. This attacks during the battle phase, so it gets to attack 3 times with 1 attack. And it has Hunt, so it can attack anywhere, so it just basically smacks cards. Basically, it just attacks anything that you want it to. It can get rid of most 2 HP cards before they can attack, most 1 HP cards, and 3 HP cards after they have attacked. So very nice, and of course that's 5 HP, so it can't be removed easily. It's a very nice damage sponge again. Then we have Dino. Dino really didn't need anything new because the old cards were all keyword slop, but the keywords are very good, so the deck overall was very powerful but very boring. So there's now more things that make it less boring, like Speed Sprite, a 0/0 free that says Dissenter 2, and enemy sprite gains the effect Flash until the end of the battle phase. So the way this works is that because Dissenter happens at the start of its battle, it means that the start of the battle phase has already happened. So basically, with this effect, it prevents an enemy sprite from attacking. Very, very powerful effect, I'll say. Then we have Power Sprite, a 1/2/1 that says when played, opponent gains priority. So priority switching, priority gaining was always part of Dino, but I really wanted to lean into that more in preparation for future cards that do actually care about it. But of course, this is a good way to how do they put it? Because priority affects the order in which battles go, you could use this to manipulate how battles are arranged. And of course, it's a 2/1, which breaks the settled stat line of 1 cost. So again, very nice. And we have Machine Sprite, a 2/1/2 that says Dissenter 1, and an ally sprite gains the effect Sneaky until the end of the battle phase. So once again, because of how battles are structured, you can make it so that an ally sprite can attack again. So you will probably want to do it after it has already attacked, so it doesn't go slower. And that is all an Dino. I mean, I didn't really feel like any of these cards are too impactful, but they certainly help Dino, because Dino really didn't have any of these lower cost cards, especially zero cost, so Speed Sprite helps in filling in that gap. So that is all the cards, except I lied. There's the new Koilo card that represents this new set in the form of Moksha Sprite, which is a 7/7/0 that says static enemy sprites in this lane gain the effect Spectral, so it does 7 guaranteed. But of course, this doesn't have any HP, so you'll have to find a way to use this. This is the deal with every Koilo card. They are very powerful, they are very costly, they always feature 0/0/7/0 stats in their AP or HP or even both. And they always have a very powerful effect, but of course they require heavy deck building to make them worth using due to their costliness. So, I mean, this video has been very long, so let's just move on to the final part now that we have looked over all the new cards of this set. To look at the new way the mod is like. Also, look at all these lovely games. Ignore this one. This one is very bad. Boo! I'm joking. You should play it. I liked it. The career is questionable though. Okay, so all the new decks, as you can see, have been outfitted with the new cards. Like Hydro now has Dew Sprite and Oasis Sprite and Sea Sprite. Remember them? Necro now has all the three new cards. Wow, Fright and Soul and Dread. And Geo now has Dirt and Dust and Mountain. And what else? But you can see that all the old decks that had a 4 cost piling them now has their 5 cost piling them. And you might have noticed that there are now 2 Pyro and Chrono precons. So there's now a new one for the new 5 costs, and eventually every element will gain their own little second deck, because they'll all eventually get 2 5 costs, but we'll see where that leads us. And yeah, that's all the new developments, except I lied, because the 11th set is also coming to February 15th, but very slowly in the form of custom cards. So that's what the 11th set is all about. The 11th set is made up of only custom cards made by other people. And here's an example made by um, the Abyss Garden Morphing Spray 502 that says, when played, search your deck, swap this card. Swap this with a card from your non-boards, and this is a very nice card to swap with anything else from other zones. And so that's how custom cards work. So you can ask me to design a art piece. You don't I don't think, actually no, you don't tell me what you want it to be. You can just tell me the name, and the effect. That is all I will take into account. I may take into account your stats, your desired element, and your desired art, but I mean, I will make it fit the February 15th art style and also make it balanced in the game. And I do believe Morphing Sprite is quite balanced. So, if you want to add a custom card to the game, you should put it in the comments section so I can see what you wish for me to make. But they will not be added to the mod. So currently there's like over 40 of these custom cards, but there's only one because you will have to play the game to, wow, playing the game crazy, to have them added to the mod. So get playing with these new set 2 cards, and of course I'm always looking for lovely suggestions, because of course the new set 2 cards are not very balanced yet. And oh yeah, we saw tutorial decks, and I haven't changed them at all, as well as the blessings, which I also haven't touched. So yeah, are these looking weird? No, they aren't. Okay, well, this was a nice little video, wasn't it? Goodbyes. Um, get playing. Yes, get playing.